There's a truth we often forget when we're in the trenches. A truth that feels unglamorous, uncomfortable, sometimes hard on the ego. But nevertheless, it's this. If you are not willing to play the fool, you cannot be the master. It's not optional. It's simply the cost. And sure, when we see it on paper, it makes sense. It sounds almost poetic, like one of those motivational posters you walk by, you glance at, nod, and keep moving. But when you're in it, it's a different story entirely. When you're standing at the intersection of your heart pulling you one way and your head screaming every reason you're not enough, it's no longer poetic. It becomes brutal. Imposter syndrome doesn't knock once and leave. It rings in your head on repeat. The fear of criticism never seems to vanish. The anxiety, the embarrassment, sometimes even anger at being a beginner when it feels like everyone else is an expert. Well, it stacks on top of you until the weight feels unbearable. And in that moment, your mind does a lot of things, but it certainly does not whisper, hey, this is good. This is growth. This is the cost of admission to mastery. No, our lizard brains scream. Run. Run as fast as you can. Get out. Find something easier, something more comfortable, something that feels more you. That's what we're designed to do, solve problems. And again, when our brains see discomfort, when they sense pain, they rush to eliminate the pain. It makes perfect practical sense. Make it stop, the brain says. But what it doesn't understand is that the discomfort is not the problem. Surprise, it's the solution. I'm going to take you way back to one of my favorite examples of this, Michelangelo. Right, when we think of Michelangelo, we certainly think of a genius. You know, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, creation of Adam, the marble David. His name is synonymous with mastery. But here's what most people don't know. When Pope Julius II commanded him to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, Michelangelo resisted. Didn't feel qualified. In fact, he flat out said he was a sculptor, not a painter. Painting that vast ceiling seemed like an impossible task, way outside of his skill set, and perhaps destined to expose his shortcomings to the world. And so he stalled, and he argued, and he begged to be let out, because like all of us, Michelangelo feared looking like a fool. But history didn't let him hide. Right? The commission went forward, and Michelangelo found himself day after day lying on scaffolding, paint dripping into his eyes, wrestling with a medium he didn't even consider his own. He doubted his abilities, he struggled, he felt like an imposter in his own craft. And yet, 4 years later, he stepped back, and the ceiling he created wasn't just good, it became one of the most celebrated achievements in the history of art. The ceiling of the Sistine Chapel wasn't painted by someone confident and certain of his place in history. Much more human experience, right? It was painted by someone who thought they weren't qualified, who felt out of place, who feared being exposed. I don't know if you've been there, but I have. That is the point. Mastery is born in the moments we feel least like masters. And, take that metaphor to the present day. Think about some of the creators you admire most, the ones with millions of followers, the ones who seem to command the camera with ease. If you scroll all the way back to their first videos, right, if they've had the courage to leave them up, you'll find something very different. You'll see someone fumbling through words, rambling without direction. You'll see a lack of confidence, shaky delivery, uncertain eyes staring back into the lens. Or more realistically, probably somewhere around the lens, right? You get the idea. They weren't experts. They weren't even good. But again, that's the point. How could they be? You don't walk into a gym the first time, load the bar up and bench 225. No, you start with weight so light it feels insignificant. While some guy, by the way, across the room is probably curling the same amount you're trying to bench. And that sting, that frustration, that's the toll booth on the road to greatness. The awkwardness, the doubt, insecurity, it's all real, it's all normal, it's all merely the price of admission. But here's the tragedy. Because there is a tragedy, and it is a tragedy of great magnitude. Most people never pay that toll. And it's not because they can't. That's the thing, it's because they won't. They talk themselves out of it before the momentum has a chance to shift. Before that tiny snowball rolling downhill turns into an avalanche. They trade long-term mastery for short-term comfort. Never realizing they were one rep, one video, one attempt away from the tide turning. And so they go back to what's easy, to what doesn't scare them. They go back to being comfortable, and in doing so, they go back to being stuck. So let me remind you, when you feel foolish, when the weight feels heavy, when your words, stumble out awkwardly and uncertain, this is not failure. This is certainly not proof you don't belong. This is the evidence that you are exactly where you need to be. Because mastery is not about talent handed down from the heavens. It's about walking through the valley of foolishness with enough faith to keep moving. Every single expert you look up to, every voice that's inspired you, every innovator that's changed the game, at some point they were the fool in the room. They stood at the bench lifting less than the guy next to them. They stood behind the camera saying too much or not enough. They stood in front of audiences that did not clap, and they kept going. That's the difference. Not that they were born better or that they had a magical gift you do not. It's that they refused to let being the fool stop them from becoming the master. So next time the little voice says run, get out, you're not good enough, you're embarrassing yourself, stop, take a breath, and remember this is the cost. This is the toll to enter the path you say you want, and if you're willing to pay it, if you can endure the season of looking foolish, the day will come when you'll look back and realize that season was the very thing that made you. Because only those who have the courage to be the fool earn the right to be the master.